Hello and welcome to another episode of Moonshot Nutrition. This is Caffeine Part 3. Now, in this video I'm going to talk to you about possible side effects of caffeine, as well explain to you how you actually metabolize caffeine in your liver. Not the chemical process, but rather to just give you an understanding of how this is different from person to person, and just touch on a few of the other differences, biological differences people have with respect to how they actually respond to caffeine. So let's just jump right in. The first thing you need to know about caffeine is most of the negative side effects of caffeine, like increased blood pressure, I've heard decalcification of bones. These things, a slight increase in blood pressure is definitely usually what accompanies caffeine. It's not usually a problematic increase in blood pressure unless you already have blood pressure problems. This, of course, is going to not be true for people that are hypersensitive to caffeine. So if you're the kind of person that will take, say, a can of Coke, Diet Coke preferably, or a cup of coffee at noon, and you'll still be up at 2 a.m. cleaning the kitchen floor or something, then you're really sensitive, and odds are caffeine will affect your blood pressure in a more negative way than, say, people that have a more normal response. As far as your tolerance to caffeine goes, one thing I forgot to mention in the other video, it happens very quickly. It actually starts happening within the first week of taking caffeine. So just be aware, you will build a tolerance to caffeine, especially if you take it daily, really, really fast. And by the way, you heard me mention decalcification of bones. Look, that it might possibly happen to people that are using way too much caffeine, have crappy diets, no good supplementation, and so on. I'm not claiming it can't happen, but look, I promise you, having a morning cup of coffee, this is what giving you osteoporosis or osteopenia, or that's not your problem. I promise you. So don't worry about caffeine in that kind of use. Really high doses like 500 milligrams a day, 1,000 milligrams a day, yes, it might actually be able to contribute to a small degree to the decalcification of your bones. Now, the other things that I want to tell you about caffeine is how to get off of it. Getting off of caffeine is actually not terribly hard. All you really need to do is, if you're on a really large amount of caffeine, we're talking 500 plus milligrams a day, then just start tracking your caffeine use and bring it down by about 100 milligrams a day to 200 milligrams a day, whichever you can tolerate, and then use whatever over-the-counter headache medicine, if you need it, to deal with the inevitable caffeine headaches. Because make no mistake, the one constant for people that are trying to get off of caffeine, that have built up some kind of addiction, are the headaches. They're always with us. They hit just about everyone. The only people they don't hit are people that have been taking daily sources of caffeine that are so small that they never really felt them in the first place. Maybe it was because they are relative non-responders to caffeine in moderate doses, and maybe it's because they're just lucky and they didn't get a headache. But most people are going to get headaches, and the way you minimize those is you come off of caffeine slowly. 1 to 200 milligrams a day, or if you're not using that much caffeine, say between 100 and 300 milligrams of caffeine a day, then just reduce by half each day until you get down to your last 50 milligrams, and then you're done. The last thing I want to tell you about caffeine is regarding caffeine metabolism. This is where people misunderstand caffeine a lot. I mentioned earlier that caffeine's metabolized in your liver, but it uses an enzyme that, based on your genetics as well as epigenetics, the amount of this enzyme that your body produces can be wildly different from one person to the next. What that means is some people are very fast metabolizers, particularly smokers, interestingly enough. They will metabolize caffeine in down to the half-life, so metabolize half a dose of caffeine, whatever that is, in about 3 to 4 hours. That's real fast metabolism. Metabolism that takes longer for some people that have very small amounts of this enzyme, it can actually take in excess of 8 hours. This is why some people can drink caffeine throughout the day, go to bed, and sleep like a baby. Literally after having a after-dinner cappuccino. And this is also why some people, if they have a coffee beyond noon, they're not sleeping at all. And while yes, obviously caffeine sensitivity plays a role here, when you see effects that go for that long, it has a lot to do with how you respond, how fast, you metabolize it. All right, so the slow metabolizers out there need to cut their caffeine use much earlier in the day if they still want to sleep. And if you get the worst of both worlds, you're both very sensitive and you're a slow metabolizer, you might want to never touch caffeine outside of the morning or never touch it at all. And if that's you, sorry, that's just the game that you have to play. Last thing to think about is that I mentioned how smokers tend to be very fast metabolizers. Women that are entering their menstrual cycles or are on any kind of birth control, you all tend to be very slow metabolizers. Again, you will always find exceptions, but entering your menstrual cycle, which isn't quite as severe about slowing down the metabolization of caffeine, as well as being on the pill, which very much slows down the metabolism of caffeine. It's just sort of how the cookie crumbles. So if you are taking anything to try and act as a birth control, or you are entering your menstrual cycles, just be aware of what you're doing with caffeine and how that's going to affect you. Okay, again, more people would use caffeine more intelligently if they understood what it was doing. And the last video I'm going to make is how best to intelligently utilize your caffeine in ways that I haven't been able to explain yet. This is Addison from Moonshot Nutrition. Thank you so much for watching. Make the world a better place. Bye-bye.